नमस्कार। अमेरिका और इंडिया दोनों के रिलेशंस बेहतर होते जा रहे हैं दिन ब दिन और खास तौर से अफगानिस्तान में एक गवर्नमेंट का तख्ता पलट हुआ जिसमें पाकिस्तान का सीधा सीधा हाथ था और इस तख्ता पलट के बाद अमेरिका पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस और भी खराब होते दिख रहे हैं। पहले ही जो बाइडेन बहुत दिन से फोन नहीं किया, जब से कुर्सी पे बैठे तब से उन्होंने फोन नहीं किया है पाकिस्तानी प्राइम मिनिस्टर इमरान खान को। और साथ में अब वहां के डिफेंस और इंडियन डिफेंस जो स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप दिख रही है उससे पाकिस्तान खासा घबराया हुआ है। इसी पर बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ हैं प्रीति उपाला जी, जो कि पेशे से एक जर्नलिस्ट हैं, साथ में एक हॉलीवुड एक्ट्रेस भी हैं, बॉलीवुड में भी काम कर चुकी हैं, अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड ऑस्ट्रेलिया में भी काम कर चुकी हैं, अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड कई जगह काम कर चुकी हैं। जर्नलिज्म में इन्होंने एक अपना अच्छा खासा करियर बनाया, साथ में एज एन एक्ट्रेस भी इनका करियर अच्छा रहा है। हम इन्हीं से बात करेंगे। प्रीति जी, बहुत बहुत स्वागत है आपका हमारे शो में। ये जो अफगानिस्तान पाकिस्तान जो हमें नेक्सस दिख रहा है, उस नेक्सस के चलते हुए क्या आपको लग रहा है पाकिस्तान अमेरिका रिलेशंस खराब होते जाएंगे?
Namaste, Rohit ji. Pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me. Always wonderful to speak to your audience. Yes, very, very exciting times again in my neck or our neck of the neighborhoods, I should say. I really, it never stops to amuse me. I think Pakistan has for decades always uh, eaten more than it can chew, right? And somehow it's gotten away with it. But I think this one time, I don't think it's. I think they will be back. It will backfire their intentions and their actions in a way that it probably hasn't before, because they think that they are, as the Taliban takes over Afghanistan, this is going to be this is a huge win for them. On paper, maybe it's a small victory, of course, they're celebrating today, but it will come back to bite them because Taliban are not going to give up any control to certainly not Pakistan army and even no, I mean the problem with the Afghan Pakistan relationship itself is that it's quite complicated. You've got Taliban, you've got the main military and the Imran Khan's government, but then you have the TTP, who are sort of a big nuisance to Pakistan itself, but then they are sort of kindred spirits with the Taliban. So you have this sort of a strange triangle happening in Pakistan that obviously the Western media doesn't know about, doesn't talk about, and that eventually will blow up into something. But I think Taliban is way too smart to give up control. They are renting out the Pakistani army to sort of do all their dirty work, so to speak, and so on, just like China does too, and just like many other countries have, because that's really what they're a client state, right? That's what they've become in the world today. And to be honest, as every day moves ahead, their value as a client state is becoming less and less valuable. And I think they kind of realize this. They're kind of trying to salvage their position, their strategic depth, their political prowess in the region. But I think that they're it's falling on deaf ears and they're really fooling themselves in this matter. So they've got grand illusions. It's always been a state with grand delusions, I should say, about who they are and their sort of place in the subcontinent and in Central Asia. And I just think that they're not able to see the truth for what it is. US foreign policy has to change a little bit with the coming times, and that'll affect them directly. So you'll see, they might, on paper they're going to be resilient and strong, but I think internally there's a lot of churn. People are upset, their own citizens are upset, and there's rifts happening between the army, military, all their little insurgency groups that they've got going, and so on and so forth. So I think in some way we almost can sit back and watch, let them unravel as they do. And perhaps it's better that we don't get involved, at least in this way, because I think the damage that they can do to themselves is greater than any damage that any other country can probably bestow upon them.
या तो क्या आपको ऐसा लग रहा है कि अमेरिका पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस और खराब होते जाएंगे, दे विल बिकम इवन वर्स एंड जैसे चाइना से दोस्ती बढ़ रही है और हमारे एरिया में क्वाड बनाया गया है अमेरिका की तरफ से, तो किस लेवल पे आप जाते देख रही हैं इस अमेरिका पाकिस्तान दोस्ती को?
Yeah, great question. So there is obviously there are two I guess perspectives that you one can look at the US Pakistan relationship. One is the public sentiment, the public domain. You know, what does the average American think? And to be honest, pre 9/11, they didn't have any opinion of Pakistan, and post 9/11, all they know about Pakistan is that it's the country that gave shelter to Osama bin Laden, the public enemy number one. That is genuinely the sentiment of the majority of Americans. So whatever PR campaign Pakistan wanted to run, as far as their role and their assistance to the U.S. goes, as far as the common American goes, it all they think of is that this is a place where they hide, the bad guys, which is, so that sort of karmically that didn't work out for them so much. And of course, the other perspective is, how the Pentagon has viewed this relationship. Four consecutive governments, I think, have misread the situation, each one in a slightly different way. I think in some cases they knew what the problem was, but they didn't do anything. And in other cases, there was a complete failure, I think, of understanding the history of the region, the politics of the region. And I think their lack of understanding even the partition situation between India and Pakistan, which really sowed the seeds to this Afghan problem. But your question was, will how will the relationships move on uh, further from here? I think it will deteriorate as much as there are groups in the US that want to turn a blind eye, as they have for many decades. And they think that they're able to use Pakistani airspace, and even a land base for their, so that their army can move through. It's a passage of way and so on. That's just on. I mean, that's all. That's a great sort of jingle, I think. Sounds very cool, but in reality, I think they're getting a lot less than what they bargained for. And now that the troops are gone, they don't need those bases anymore. So, what is this great strategic depth and sort of geopolitical situation that Pakistan can offer to the US? Uh, so there will still be people who want to just ignore everything, the nefarious activities of Pakistan, and still peddle on this sort of uh, school of thought that says no, we still need them. There are our great ally in this great fight against terrorism. But I think as Pakistan gets closer with China, that's going to become less and less, because whether you like it or not, China is in direct competition with the US, vying for that global power position. And China is really giving the US a run for its money. So as Pakistan gets closer, I don't think you can pretend that sort of, I guess, that love affair isn't going on. And I mean, people can see it in plain sight at this point, and policy has to change. They are going to be people very upset, I think, with the I think what the US has let Pakistan get away with all of these 20 years, so to speak, and they don't want to, really waste any more time, energy, or resources on Pakistan, because there's been no return on investment. So I think there's going to be, whether they like it or not, because they are people that, they it doesn't matter to them, and they still sort of see Pakistan as this benign state that is only going to help the US. I think they have no choice but to really take a good look at what's going on, and their dependence on Pakistan will genuinely reduce. If the troops need to come back there, we have a serious problem, because then again they will be that middle person, the interlocutor, so to speak. But we don't know when the troops will, or if they'll ever come back to that region, right? But I think the relationship will deteriorate organically. It'll never, unfortunately, for all Indian viewers, I don't think it'll just dissipate or disappear as we probably hope. Like, we always think, what are you doing? You're getting nothing out of this relationship. But that's not how policy, and that's not how the defense strategic partnerships work between countries. They need Pakistan even just as a sort of a in their back pocket should they ever need it. And I think the luckiest and the unluckiest thing about Pakistan is its location, the fact that it shares borders with other countries that India doesn't. Um, so we don't, or as we could be that interlocutor, and we rightly should be, but we're not. And time for us to step up diplomatically at least, because we can't do it on the ground.
राइट। अमेरिका चाइना ट्रेड जो हुआ करता था, अब काफी कम हो गया ट्रंप एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के बाद से। पहले इतने हाई लेवल पे था कि दूसरे कंट्रीज उसको कंपेयर नहीं कर सकते थे। अब एक ट्रेड वॉर दिख रही है सामने, जिसको बाइडेन ने रिवर्स करने की कोशिश नहीं की, उसे पलटने की कोशिश नहीं की, वो कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं उस पर। 6 महीने से ज्यादा हो चुके, 8 महीने के आसपास हो चुके बाइडेन को आए हुए। तो क्या आपको लग रहा है फ्यूचर चाइना और अमेरिका के रिलेशन का, क्या ये कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की ओर जा रहे हैं, या ये दोनों स्ट्रेटेजिकली हो सकता है एक दूसरे के खिलाफ काम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन वैसे जब ट्रेड की बात आती है तो ये ट्रेड जरूर करेंगे और बेटर रिलेशंस बनाने की कोशिश करेंगे?
Oh yeah, a good question. Private sector in the US doesn't care so much about, things like nationalism, national security, even public policy in many ways, or foreign policy either. They only care about their bottom line. They're more than happy to do business with whoever wants to do business with them, right? So, and I think what China has done very successfully is set themselves up as the manufacturing hub in the world that honestly no other one nation can ever replace. You'll have to get 10 countries together to replace a one China. That's just how they've set it up. And because other countries weren't that proactive, 10, 20 years ago, it's kind of the catch up game is also not very easy. So they will always be the manufacturing hub, and people will have to do business with them whether they like it or not. And even India does plenty of business with China too, and vice versa. That's how business works. It's especially trade, and there is actually plenty of profits to be made on all sides. But I think just from a as China rises and becomes more aggressive and more assertive on the global stage, and at this point, 20 years ago, I think they had the same intentions and sentiments as they do today, but it was always a matter of keeping face and not showing it in public, and just having this poker face, and then yet thinking and doing exactly what they're doing now. But now I think they've gone to the point where they don't care anymore. They don't want to pretend. They're telling the world, this is who we are and this is what we're going to do. And I think in the following years, they'll be even more vocal and assertive, where there's no choice. I mean, you have to really even almost take them for face value, because they are basically telling you what they're going to do to the world. And in some cases, you might not have much of an option either. And as that continues, the US, in some ways, people keep saying it's a declining power. I think it's going to take a long, long time before it would ever officially decline. I think it's going to be the superpower for a long time. However, it's weakened in many ways. It's not, sort of perhaps the powerhouse that it used to be. And there will be a lot of conflicts and clashes, I think, in terms of global dominance and so on. And so we will see sort of a very, very tumultuous relationship, I think, between the US and China. Look, in 2024, we're going to have another election. If we elect another president from another party, I think this foreign policy, as far as China goes, will change. Absolutely. By that point, I think things would have escalated to a certain point. And so watch out for the next president of the US, because I think they're going to come with their own ideas. And if one of these extremely, if somebody from the GOP gets elected, they have a very different point of view on all of this, and they're very upset. So they're gonna come in and they're gonna really look to shake things up from the get go. So you'll see some policy changes, I think, and just the sentiment of the U.S. towards China, even very publicly, is going to be very different than what it has been. And even now, it's changing a little bit, but they're gonna go gung ho, I think, if there's a change in administration.
राइट। एक आखिरी क्वेश्चन, फाइनल क्वेश्चन, वो ये पाकिस्तान या अमेरिका या इंडिया से रिलेटेड नहीं है। आप हॉलीवुड में काम करती हैं, आप हॉलीवुड एक्ट्रेस हैं, वहां हॉलीवुड में कितने इंडियंस आपको मिलते हैं और कितने इंडियंस वहां पे काम करते हैं? मींस नॉट ओनली एक्टिंग, हमें पता है कि वहां पे मलाइका हैं, वहां पे ऐश्वर्या राय काम कर चुकी हैं, कितने इंडियंस हैं? और मतलब पोस्ट प्रोडक्शन वगैरह में, मतलब ऑफ स्क्रीन भी कितने इंडियंस आपको मिलते हैं और कैसा है हॉलीवुड में काम करना?
Okay, great question. So a few things. Um, there are a lot of Indian Americans. I think it's 5 million at least. It's probably more than that, who live in America. Um, but very few of them work in Hollywood or in entertainment. So the Indian American community are doctors, lawyers, engineers. Politics now. Everything else in entertainment, it's still very, very, the pool is very small. And on top of that, you have to be trained, you have to be good at what you do. So when you look at, I guess, you know actors who are qualified and trained for a part, you're talking about a very small number. And then when you talk about producers, directors, writers of Indian origin, it's very, very small. That's the reality of it. Also, it's like takes two to tango, because one is you need a lot of, like, the talent needs to be, they need to be a lot of Indian actors in Hollywood. That's one thing. The second thing is there needs to be a place for these actors, right? So you need like a Caucasian American writer to make a show and write a part for an Indian or an Indian American. Like The Big Bang Theory is a good example. There was a part for an Indian character, and that actor got that part, and the show was a huge success. But that's one example, and there's not many shows like that. So as long as the American writers don't write parts for Indian characters, you will not see too many in movies, TV, even in broadcasting and so on. That's just the truth. Now, I think like off screen or below the line, we say post production, all those kind of things. Well, some of these are outsourced to India. They're outsourced to India and China. Actually, they've both India and China do a good job with some of these uh, post kind of uh, services. And in the industry itself, the number of Indians in these kind of roles again is very, very small. I mean, it's competitive to begin with, but on top of that, it, you'll find a few. Um, people are more fascinated about it. I think you're having some comedians, you're having some talk show hosts. There's certainly people are more intrigued. I think the Indian American community is a little bit like they want to be represented, but I think a lot of things need to fall into place for that to happen. And you mentioned some Bollywood actresses who came to, work here or came here for an interview or a show. Nobody knows them outside of India, so they will come here. Nobody really knows or cares. Which is even if Shah Rukh Khan came here, honestly, if he walked through Beverly Hills, I don't know if anybody would recognize him. That's just the way it goes. So they get a bit of a ego, I guess a reality check or a humility check when they come here, because unless they're going to Little India, nobody will recognize them, and no one really knows or cares who they are. So it's an interesting situation, but it's been very fun for me because I am not coming straight from India. I'm coming from Australia and the Middle East. My background is very diverse, very different. I do different things. So I think I can leverage more and find more places within Hollywood to work and be a part of, and not just entertainment, but also media and politics and all other industries. So, but it's Los Angeles is an amazing place still.
अच्छा, ये जो हॉलीवुड है, यहाँ पे इंडियंस बहुत ज्यादा नहीं हैं, तो कितना टफ था आपके लिए उन लोगों से एक्सेप्टेंस पाना कि शी इज एन एक्ट्रेस और ये एक्टिंग कर सकती है, और ये हमारी फिल्म इंडस्ट्री में जहां पे सारे आपको वाइट रेस दिखती है, अंग्रेज दिखते हैं, उसके बीच में इकलौती, एंड आपका कोई आपके लिए कोई रोल फिट हो, इस तरीके का कितना टफ था आपके लिए ढूंढना?
That's a great question. So it's how you look at it, because on the one hand you could say yes, you're one Indian and everybody else is Caucasian, but then on the other hand, you are one Indian and I mean, from a competition point of view, it's just you and you might only be competing with another two people, right? So the when the pool is small, there are fewer roles, but the competition is also lower, right? So there's a lot of interesting nuances. If you were like an American blonde, say a male actor, sure, many roles will be written for you, but you have to compete with 10,000 other blonde male actors to get one part as well. So the competition goes up too, and they all look alike, and that's more generic. Whereas I think if you're like a minority actor, ethnic actor, then your look and feel is very specific. So for me personally, I always went in with a good attitude, and I never, because I don't even have a very strong Indian accent or anything like that. I didn't always get cast as someone who, came from India or an Indian character. It was, just a more generic character, or somebody who's been living here for a long time, or someone who came from somewhere else. A little bit more ambiguous, I would say, ethnically. And they are roles like that, which I think some Indian actors are fitting into quite nicely if they have a vibe that's more international, commercial. Then, oh, that person surely is from India, and they sound like that, and they could have come yesterday from India, rather than, oh, somebody who's probably lived here for 15 years and thinks very American and is very Americanized in many ways. So there are many different kind of uh, ways to look at. Personally, for me, it wasn't a struggle because I'm unique. The way that I sort of pitch myself and go about my brand, I guess, is not like I'm competing with other people for some gig. I do many other things. I'm really a media personality who happens to act and now is producing a show here. So, but very, very exciting. It's great to be with creative people, and ideas come to life here. So it's like a lot of dreams come true.
Have you ever faced racism?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I don't think anybody has asked me that. I will have to say, look, there are unfortunate incidents where people are just mean and nasty, and they'll come up to you, an innocent person, and say things just because they're angry, and or they've read or seen uh, disinformation, fake news, disinformation, distortion about you, your country, your religion, all of that. I'm, very grateful, I think, to say that I haven't been victim of like hate from people, or someone just decided that they hated India so much and they came out and they attacked me as a result of that, because that does happen to all races. That didn't happen to me. Uh, I also think that it little bit is also comes from you. Obviously victims of discrimination, bigotry, and racism, they did nothing to go through what they did. However, I think somebody like myself who maybe I'm not wearing a sari. I don't have a bindi, right? I'm not speaking in Hindi with somebody. And the way that I sort of, I guess, move around and behave and operate is they think of me as just some other person who's American or maybe lives in LA. And I think they maybe differentiate me from maybe some Indian student at a university. So who might be more of a target of bullying and that sort of situation than somebody like myself. I'm my own agent, and I'm also not in the academic system. I think it's different in academia and it's different in the workplace. And also here in America with racism, sexism, ageism, all these things, they're technically they're illegal. You can sue people for that, and you can take legal action. You can go complain to somebody if you are a victim of that. So I think, I mean, it happens on the streets maybe, but in corporate environment, it's they can get into trouble if any of that is sort of shown. So I have to say I'm very lucky that certainly I didn't have that experience, but um, I know many others who have, and it's very unfortunate, especially when they were just innocent bystanders, just happened to be in the line of fire.
राइट। ये थी प्रीति उपाला जी, जो कि एक जर्नलिस्ट हैं, हॉलीवुड एक्ट्रेस हैं, बॉलीवुड में भी काम कर चुकी हैं और कई जगह काम कर चुकी हैं। इंडियन रूट्स पर इनको नाज है और ये अमेरिका में इंडिया का झंडा लेके खड़ी हैं, वहां पर हमारी रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हैं और हमारे लिए वहां पे कल्चरल एम्बेसडर भी हैं। प्रीति जी, आपसे बात करके बहुत अच्छा लगा, बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन थी। आपने हॉलीवुड पे भी बात की, पाकिस्तान अमेरिका रिलेशंस पे भी बात की। उम्मीद है आपसे एक और टॉपिक पे फिर डिस्कशन होगा जल्दी ही। अभी के लिए नमस्कार।
Namaste ji. Thank you so much for having me. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind, Dhanyawad, Namaste.